Evan Reed hated having his future decided for him, even by his own parents. As the youngest CEO in Reed Global's history, he had everything a young man could dream of: money, power, and the admiration of the entire business world. But one thing he didn't have and didn't want was an arranged marriage. From a young age, Evan was used to cold negotiations, contracts, shares, and handshakes that meant nothing. He'd learned how to read eyes and sniff out lies from a mile away. So, when his parents laid out a list of wealthy, qualified heiresses for the role of his future wife, Evan just gave a cold laugh. Picking a wife like picking stocks, huh? Evan muttered during the first family meeting, his finger tapping rhythmically on the glass table. No one answered. His mother's eyes shimmered with expectation, while his father sat in silence, as if it was a given that his son would comply. The list was nearly 10 pages long, full of names and family profiles, missing only a personal financial report. Amelia Kent, his mother said, sliding a file toward Evan. Stanford graduate, her family holds major shares in the national banking system. Beautiful, smart, and obedient. Obedient, Evan almost laughed. Alarm bells went off in his head. He'd seen that kind of obedient before. The rehearsed smiles, the scripted answers, the handshakes just firm enough to hide the greed underneath. No, Evan said flatly. Evan, don't be childish, his father said, voice low. This isn't just marriage, it's a long-term strategy. Grow up. Evan looked up, eyes cold and sharp, voice clear as glass. If growing up means selling your soul for a handshake, then I'd rather stay a child forever. No one in the room dared breathe. The air was tight, stretched like a wire. And Evan walked out of the meeting, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces. A few days later, the rumors started swirling. Evan Reed was looking for an unusual wife. No heiresses, no celebrities, no daughters of powerful families. The news sent the media and all of New York into a frenzy. Some said he'd lost his mind. Others thought it was just a PR stunt. But Evan didn't care. He hosted a personal assistant interview. At least, that was the official reason. In reality, he was looking for a girl with no strings attached, no hidden agenda. Someone just crazy enough to agree to a fake marriage. That very afternoon, as Evan sat bored, watching waves of people fill the waiting room, she walked in. Layla. Wrinkled old shirt, mud-stained jeans, messy brown hair, and frayed sneakers. She walked in without an apology, without a hint of embarrassment, like the polished hardwood floors of Reed Tower were no different than a park sidewalk. A few people whispered, mocking. Some of the security guards started to move toward her. But Evan raised a hand to stop them. Layla looked straight at him. Her eyes were clear, stubborn, and real. Nothing fake. Eyes that didn't beg or plead. You here for the job? Evan asked, leaning back in his chair, narrowing his eyes as he sized her up. Layla shrugged. Not really. I heard there was a job here, and I need the money. Figured I'd try my luck. The answer made Evan smirk. No script, no polish, just raw honesty. Luck, huh? He repeated, a rare flicker of amusement in his eyes. Layla put her hands on her hips. You don't believe it? My whole life runs on luck. Just look at me. The room fell silent. A few people stifled laughs. Evan, on the other hand, burst out laughing. For real. A free, unfiltered laugh he couldn't remember the last time he'd had. He stood up, grabbed the stack of resumes, and ripped them in half in front of everyone. Don't need these anymore. He looked at Layla, then turned to his assistant. This girl, I'm choosing her. A wave of murmurs rippled through the room, like surf crashing against the glass walls of the high-rise. But Evan didn't care. He looked at Layla and smiled, a kind of quiet release he hadn't expected to feel. I'd rather marry a dirt-streaked girl than bring home a prepackaged princess. Layla raised an eyebrow, like she was seriously considering turning around and bolting. But then she let out a dry laugh. Well then, good luck with that, Mr. Millionaire. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment, a crazy contract had been signed, not with ink, but with two hearts desperate for freedom, no matter the consequences. Evan Reed never thought he'd make such a reckless decision in under 30 seconds. But when he looked into Layla's eyes, eyes that held no greed, no hunger for fame, he knew he'd just found his way out. As soon as Layla scribbled her name on the temporary contract, Evan signaled his assistant to shut down the recruitment. No need for anyone else. He'd found the partner for his life's rebellion. The office fell quiet. Evan leaned back in his chair, casually spinning a pen between his fingers, watching the mud-splattered girl calmly wipe her shoes with a napkin. His gaze was half serious, half amused. "So," Evan began, his voice light, "do you even know what you just agreed to?" Layla looked up, eyes sharp. "Marry an arrogant millionaire for 6 months, then take the money and disappear somewhere sunny with cheap beer." Evan laughed. The honesty was so blunt, he couldn't help but like it. "No hidden clauses?" Layla asked, half joking. "No air-making required? No boring gala appearances?" "No," Evan said, shaking his head as his expression turned serious again. "We're only married on paper, live under the same roof, show up together when needed. Other than that, we each live our own life." Layla thought for a moment, then shrugged. "Honestly sounds better than most contracts I've signed before." Evan tilted his head, half curious, half smiling. "What kind of contracts did you sign before?" "Odd jobs," Layla replied, smoothing it over with a wink. "Nothing illegal, don't worry." Evan gave a slight nod. He didn't need to know the full details of her past. In this world, the past was often just a meaningless burden. He stood up and reached for a thin folder. "There are a few formalities we need to take care of. You have a passport?" "Always in my backpack," Layla said, patting the worn-out bag slung over her shoulder. "Good." Evan smiled faintly. "We're getting legally married. I don't do things halfway." Layla let out a laugh. "You say that like a fake marriage is some noble act." Evan shrugged, not denying it. The next day, the two of them stood outside the city marriage office. No wedding dress, no engagement ring, no flowers. Just a bride in ripped jeans and a groom in a button-up with no tie. Layla turned to Evan as she got ready to sign the papers, half smiling, half daring. "Still time to run, you know?" Evan didn't answer right away. He looked at her. Messy hair, bright eyes, lips pressed together like she was trying to hide her nerves, then slowly shook his head. "Run?" Evan said, voice low. "I've spent my whole life running from things that didn't belong to me. This time, I'm choosing to stay." Layla froze for a second, then looked down and picked up the pen. One simple stroke of ink, but to Evan, it rang out like fireworks celebrating freedom. On the way back, in Evan's Range Rover, Layla leaned back in her seat, legs casually propped up on the dashboard, completely ignoring the driver's stunned look. "This is insane," Layla muttered, squinting at the traffic outside. "A week ago, I was arguing with my landlord about rent." Evan glanced over. "Well, you've upgraded now," Layla snorted. "Oh yeah, fake wife to a millionaire, every girl's dream." Evan laughed too. He didn't explain, didn't need to. Between them, sarcasm was the most comfortable way to hide the unnamed fears still lurking under the surface. The car pulled up in front of a sleek, luxurious penthouse. Evan opened the door and gestured for Layla to step in. "Welcome to our temporary home." Layla walked inside, taking in the massive sunlit space. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a sweeping view of the New York skyline. She let out a low whistle. "Definitely an upgrade from my dump." Evan crossed his arms, watching her with a look that was half serious, half teasing. "But don't get too comfortable. Remember, 6 months. Layla turned to him with a sly smile, like she'd just heard a joke Evan didn't realize he'd made. "Don't get too used to me either," she shot back, dropping her backpack on the floor and walking straight in, leaving Evan standing there, watching her, a quiet laugh slipping out without him meaning to. Beneath the shell of a cold, calculated contract, maybe what they'd just signed wasn't just paperwork. Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. The next morning, officially married on paper, Evan walked into the kitchen in wrinkled pajamas and a mood so bad not even coffee could fix it. He wasn't used to someone else in his space, especially not someone like Layla. She was perched on the kitchen counter, wearing an oversized hoodie, eating cereal straight from the box, legs swinging like she was hanging out in a park. "Morning, hubby," Layla said between loud crunches, voice casual as ever. Evan frowned. "I'm starting a list of things you're not allowed to call me." Layla raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Need some extra A4 paper for that?" Evan shot her a glare, but said nothing, pouring himself a cup of coffee and leaning against the counter across from her, watching the strange girl who looked way too at home in his apartment. "Could at least act like a guest," he muttered. Layla shrugged. "Guest? I'm your legal wife, at least on paper. By law, I'm entitled to half this penthouse." Evan nearly spit out his coffee. "If you try to claim it, I'll give you the broom closet over there." Layla burst out laughing, cereal spilling from her mouth, which only made Evan silently question what kind of temporary insanity had made him sign that ridiculous contract in the first place. The morning passed in a blur of nonstop banter. Evan couldn't remember the last time someone had bothered him with so many harmless little annoyances like Layla did. She turned on the TV to watch a cooking show, then forgot to turn up the volume. She put her dirty shoes on the leather couch. She used a $1,000 bottle of wine from the fridge to make spaghetti sauce. Evan was borderline losing it, but strangely, he didn't hate it as much as he thought he would. By afternoon, while Evan was buried in an online meeting, Layla popped her head into his office, waving something in her hand. "You know this pile of stocks is tanking hard, right?" she asked, flapping a financial newspaper. Evan took off his glasses, looked up, and raised an eyebrow. "You read the Wall Street Journal?" Layla pouted. "Skimmed it. Not everyone in a hoodie is an idiot, Mr. CEO." He laughed, nodding in acknowledgement. There was something about the way she carried herself, confident, unfiltered, not trying to impress him, that made Evan feel lighter. That night, for their first dinner together, Layla spread out a mountain of Chinese takeout across the pricey marble dining table. She slid a box of fried rice toward him and stuffed her own mouth with a heap of chow mein. "Eat. I'm not planning to destroy your kitchen with my cooking skills." Evan hesitated. "You do know I have a private chef, right?" Layla shrugged. "I also know this takeout tastes better than those tiny French dishes you usually eat." Evan picked up his chopsticks, took a bite. She wasn't wrong. It was good. They ate in silence for a while. The only sounds were chewing and the distant hum of the news on TV. Midway through the meal, Layla got up to grab more water. When she came back, she quietly placed a glass of unsweetened orange juice in front of Evan. He paused for a second. He hated sweet orange juice. Very few people noticed that. Hell, even people close to him often forgot. "Don't overthink it," Layla said before he could ask. "You mumbled something about it yesterday. I heard." Evan smiled softly for the first time all day, feeling like this apartment might actually be a place where he could breathe. Day by day, the small clashes didn't go away, but they slowly turned into something oddly comforting. Layla still left the toothpaste uncapped. Evan still lost his temper when she finished the toilet paper and didn't replace the roll. They still fought over the TV remote every night like two kids in a college dorm. But in the middle of those petty arguments, unexpected moments of softness started to slip through. One time, Evan forgot his raincoat. As he was heading out the door, Layla shoved an old umbrella into his hand and warned, "Come home soaked and you're sleeping on the balcony. Don't say I didn't warn you." One late night, Evan woke up from a nightmare, something that rarely happened, and saw Layla sitting quietly on the couch, reading. Just one glance from her, and somehow, the tension in his chest eased. Layla didn't ask what he dreamt about. She just tossed him a light blanket and muttered, "What? Dreamt I turned your place into a cat sanctuary." Evan chuckled softly in the dark. No, he had dreamt of being alone in a crowd. And her quiet presence, right then, meant more than any words ever could. One morning, Evan caught Layla standing on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up. No lipstick, no fancy clothes, just her, as she was. He stood there silently, suddenly realizing this penthouse had never truly been a home. It was just an expensive box holding a lonely man. But now, with the laughter, the petty arguments, and the lovely chaos Layla brought, it was slowly becoming a place where life actually happened. Evan walked over, took the coffee cup from her hand, and took a sip. "Hey, that's mine," Layla protested. "Balcony usage fee," Evan said with a shrug, completely deadpan. Layla narrowed her eyes at him, then burst out laughing. Her laugh rang out in the morning light, like music Evan never knew he needed, until right then. Saturday morning, Evan sat in the living room, eyes fixed on his laptop screen, but his mind was somewhere else. He was trying to focus on reviewing the new quarter's financial strategy, something he usually knocked out in under an hour. But today, every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward the girl sprawled on the sofa, legs hooked over the armrest, holding a beat-up old book. Layla was frowning in concentration, occasionally mumbling to herself. Evan squinted. The book wasn't some romance novel or trashy tabloid like he'd assumed. When he looked closer, he saw the title: Corporate Finance for Strategists. A poor, scrappy girl running from life, reading advanced financial strategy? Evan rested his chin on his hand, silently watching. She flipped through the book quickly, not the way someone faked it to look smart, but like she actually understood what she was reading. He was surprised, but brushed it off. Maybe she was just another big dreamer. Lots of people were. After breakfast, Evan had some complex reports to go over. Half out of curiosity, half as a challenge, he tossed a thick stack of documents toward Layla. "Explain to me why this investment tanked," he said. Layla looked up at him, completely unfazed. She sat up, skimmed through the data tables, then muttered, "Logistics costs rose 7% due to supply chain disruptions. At the same time, Asia's tightening credit market is cutting consumer demand. This investment leans heavily into the consumer sector, so the drop was inevitable." She looked up, squinting slightly. "You should reallocate 20% into infrastructure stocks for the next 6 months." Evan froze, almost forgetting to breathe. That wasn't some random guess. It was a fast, sharp, and dead-on analysis. He masked his surprise with a faint smirk. "Not bad, virtual assistant." Layla just shrugged, burying her face in a bag of snacks without a hint of embarrassment. But inside Evan, a seed of doubt had just been planted. That afternoon, they took a walk to a small cafe near the park. Evan dressed casually, gray t-shirt, black jeans. Layla, as usual, rocked her oversized hoodie and worn-out sneakers. They picked a seat out on the patio, where the sun was soft, the breeze cool, and people bustled past on the sidewalk. Layla stirred her latte, teasing Evan about how he'd wiped down his chair before sitting. They bantered back and forth, laughter bubbling up between them like it had always been there. Just then, a middle-aged woman walked by their table. She caught a glimpse of Layla, then froze. "Miss Brookshaven?" she said, stunned. Layla flinched, the spoon in her hand nearly slipping from her fingers. Evan turned to look at the woman, then back at Layla. She was forcing a nervous smile. "Sorry, you've got the wrong person," Layla said quickly, lowering her head. The woman hesitated for a moment, then shook her head and walked away. Evan stayed still, his face calm, but inside, every instinct was flaring. Brookshaven. That name. It rang a bell. Wasn't that the name of one of the most powerful families in the investment world? That night, while Layla was in the shower, Evan quietly searched on his phone. The Brookshaven family, an old financial dynasty with nearly a century of history holding stakes in dozens of major corporations. The sole heir, a girl named Layla Brookshaven, briefly mentioned in a finance article years ago, then gone. Vanished from the media completely. Evan set down his phone, staring into the dark space in front of him. Layla Brooks, or more accurately, Layla Brookshaven. He thought back to her eyes, that half-sarcastic, half-defiant smile. The way she talked about freedom, about escaping expectations, and the way she analyzed financial data like it was second nature. It wasn't a coincidence, not even close. When Layla stepped out of the bathroom, hair still wet, towel wrapped around her, Evan was still on the sofa, eyes fixed on her. "What?" she asked, a bit hesitant, catching the intensity in his stare. Evan shrugged, trying to keep his tone casual. "Just thinking about who you really are." Layla paused for a second, then she smiled, light as a breeze, giving nothing away. She didn't answer. Evan didn't press. He didn't ask again. Didn't say another word. But inside, the pieces were already snapping into place. A poor girl who read advanced finance books, who broke down investment data with surgical precision, who got recognized on the street, called by the name of a powerful dynasty. Layla Brooks. Who was she, really? Evan tightened his grip on the glass in his hand, eyes heavy with thoughts he couldn't yet put into words. There was a truth behind those elusive smiles, something waiting for him. And he knew, whether he liked it or not, it would break through eventually. Evan Reed hated galas. They suffocated him. Crammed with perfectly tailored tuxedos, glittering gowns, and sweet lies dressed as polite conversation. But tonight, he had no choice. One of Reed Global's key strategic investors was hosting a 50th anniversary celebration, and Evan's presence wasn't optional. He stepped into the grand hall, scanning the crowd. A sea of polished people, glasses clinking, laughter echoing, and social hugs that meant nothing. Evan had planned to do the bare minimum, greet a few people, sign a couple of memos, then slip out before anyone could drag him into some ridiculous waltz. but that plan disintegrated in minutes. A ripple of whispers stirred from the corner of the room. Evan turned. On a makeshift stage, under the spotlight, a woman stepped up to the microphone. Loose brown hair, a sapphire evening gown hugging her slender frame. She stood there, confident, poised, like the world itself had been built just to listen to her. And Evan recognized her instantly. Layla. His heart skipped. She smiled, bowed her head slightly to the audience, then began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Layla Brookshaven, heir to Brookshaven Enterprises. It's an honor to represent my family at tonight's event. The words hit Evan's ears like a blade. Sharp, cold. Brookshaven. There was no doubt left. Every piece he'd once quietly questioned now snapped into place, forming a picture he couldn't unsee. Layla wasn't some poor runaway. She wasn't just drifting through life. She was the heiress to a global financial empire. And worse, her family was currently negotiating a merger with his. A chill swept down Evan's spine. Without another glance, he turned and pushed through the crowd, stepping out of the ballroom into the night. Outside, the night wind howled. Evan leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breath. It felt like someone had slapped him clean across the face. He had chosen Layla to rebel against an arranged future, to protect the last sliver of freedom he had left. And yet, the woman he picked, the one he believed was wild, untamed, outside the mold, turned out to be more polished, more perfect than any heiress his parents had ever tried to push on him. I thought I was choosing freedom, Evan muttered, voice rough with anger and bitterness, and I ended up marrying someone even more elite than the originals? He felt like a fool, a man who dreamed of escape, only to tighten the noose with his own hands. 2 days passed. Evan didn't see Layla. He made up excuses about work, slept at the office, and ignored every short message she sent. You okay? When are you coming back for dinner? Still mad about the bathtub flood? Layla had no idea he knew, and Evan wasn't sure how to face her. Tuesday night, he finally came back to the penthouse. Layla was stretched out on the sofa, a book face down on her stomach, fast asleep. Evan stood there in silence, just watching her. The soft yellow light cast gentle shadows across her face, highlighting the curve of her jaw, the sweep of her lashes, the rare stillness in her expression. She didn't look like what he'd been taught to distrust. Not like an arrogant Brookshaven, not like a pawn in some massive deal. But the truth was still the truth, and Evan couldn't pretend he didn't know. Layla stirred, her eyes fluttering open under the weight of his stare. You're back, she mumbled sleepily. Evan nodded, shrugged off his coat, hung it on the hook. Then he stepped over and sat down across from her. Layla, he said, voice low and steady, is there anything you want to tell me? Layla jolted upright, instantly on guard. What are you talking about? Evan crossed his arms, eyes locked on hers. Brookshaven Enterprises, he said slowly. The heir to the empire, the arranged marriage with the CEO of Silvercorp, Reed Global's direct competitor. Layla's face drained of color for a split second, but only for a second. She straightened her posture, met his gaze head-on, not flinching. I take it, she said dryly. You were at that event. Evan nodded. Layla let out a long breath, bracing her elbows on her knees. I wasn't trying to lie to you, she began, her voice low and honest. I just wanted a place to breathe, a life without the mask. I ran from that arranged marriage, the same way you ran from your family's plans. Evan said nothing. She went on, voice trembling just slightly. I never thought I'd meet someone who hated being controlled as much as I do. I never thought I'd actually feel safe anywhere. Layla lowered her head, clenching her hands in her lap. But I knew, the moment you found out who I really am, it'd all be over. Evan stared at her, a storm of conflict swirling inside him. He had expected an apology, a justification, but none came. Layla didn't say sorry for being who she was, she just asked him to understand. Evan stood, walked out onto the balcony, leaving her alone in the vast, echoing room. Outside, the city blazed with light, but inside Evan, there was only a deep, sprawling dark. He had been chasing freedom. But what freedom was ever real? When your heart had already tied itself to someone, no matter who they turned out to be. The air in the penthouse felt thick, like it might explode under the weight of everything left unsaid. Layla stood by the arm of the couch, eyes fixed on Evan's back as he leaned against the balcony railing. She could feel the tension radiating off him. His clenched fists, his shoulders tight beneath his shirt, the way his breath seemed to come just a little too sharp. Evan turned around. The cool, distant look he usually wore was gone. His eyes were sharp, cutting through her like blades, slicing past every defense she'd built. "So from the very beginning," he said through gritted teeth, "this was all just a game to you?" Layla swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "It wasn't a game." "Not a game?" Evan let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You, heir to a financial empire, pretending to be some broke girl showing up for a fake assistant job?" Layla clenched her fists. "I didn't pretend to fool you. I pretended so I could breathe. That's different." Evan stepped forward, his voice sharper with every word. "You know what I hate most? Being played, being manipulated, turned into a joke for the whole damn world." Layla bit her lower lip, eyes blazing. "Oh yeah? And what about me? You think I had a choice? If I'd told you who I was up front, would you have signed that contract with me?" Evan froze. Layla stepped closer, unflinching in the face of his anger. Her voice was ice, clear, steady, unshaken. "You chose me," she said, emphasizing every word, "because you thought I was poor. Because you believed I had no ties, no baggage. But if I'm rich, if I carry a famous last name, suddenly I'm the enemy?" Evan opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Layla pressed on, her eyes so clear and direct, they pinned him in place. "So tell me, Evan, do you love me, or just the idea of me?" Silence. The only sound was the wind slipping through the crack in the door. It felt like a blow to the chest. Evan had always believed he was the sharpest one in the room, that this time he had chosen freedom. But now he couldn't even tell what was real anymore. Layla looked up at him, eyes glistening, but there was no trace of weakness. "I never forced you to trust me. I didn't force you to love me either." Her voice was hoarse, but steady. "You made that choice, just like I chose you. Not for your money, not for the name Reed, but because, for the first time, I felt like I could actually breathe around someone." 1 second, 2. Evan stood frozen, like stone. Inside him, a storm raged, anger, hurt, and a primal fear, the fear that he had just lost something precious, before he even realized what it truly was. Layla took a step back, like if she stayed any closer, she'd break down right there. "I'll leave," she whispered, voice cracking. "If that's what you want." Evan looked at her. No more sharp wit, no smug grin, just a girl standing there, doing everything she could to keep her pride from falling apart, and something in his chest cracked with her. He exhaled, gripping the balcony rail behind him like he needed it to stay upright. "You can leave," he said, voice low. "But the thing is..." Layla held her breath. "I'm not sure I can let you." The air froze. Layla stared at him, eyes wide. Evan met her gaze, and in his eyes there was no more anger, no more armor, only confusion, hurt, and something deeper, rawer, heavier than words could ever carry. They stood there, two souls torn open, by expectations, by masks, by the roles the world had forced them to play. But in that moment every pretense fell away. No titles, no contracts, just Evan and Layla, two people, stripped bare, finally facing the one truth they couldn't outrun: each other. The ocean breeze tousled Evan's hair as he sat on the old wooden bench outside the shop. The sunset painted the sky in gold, casting warm reflections on the tiny window panes where a small sign swayed in the wind: Freedom Cafe. Layla stepped out from inside, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. She wore a simple linen dress, her hair down, her smile soft as morning mist. Evan took one of the cups, his fingers brushing against hers. It was just a touch, gentle, fleeting, but it was enough to remind him. Everything he had walked away from, everything he had risked, it was worth it. All of it. 2 months ago, Evan Reed, the name that once made Wall Street hold its breath, officially stepped down as CEO of Reed Global. He walked away with no conditions, no legal battles, turning down profit shares and his inheritance. He left behind the empire he helped build. Layla wasn't a step behind. She faced the Brookshaven family with calm defiance, rejecting the arranged marriage, the throne they had carved out for her. She returned every share, released the name that had weighed on her for years. They didn't choose the easy road, but they chose themselves, and they chose each other. Evan leaned back on the bench, took a sip of his coffee, eyes following the distant line of the sea. "Do you regret it?" Layla asked, settling beside him, her head resting on his shoulder as naturally as breath. Evan smiled softly, slipping an arm around her shoulders and giving her a gentle squeeze. If I had to trade freedom to keep the fortune, he whispered, then what I'd lose wouldn't just be money. I'd lose myself. Layla closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her ear. A heartbeat real and alive, no longer boxed in by titles, no longer chained to blind expectations. The little cafe by the sea wasn't crowded. Most who stopped by were locals or wandering travelers passing through. They didn't make a fortune here, but each day felt real, and that, finally, was enough. Evan took charge of the barista counter. At first, he was clumsy, spilling milk, dropping cups, but no one complained. Layla managed the books, ran the register, and sometimes came up with little games, like giving away free pastries to whoever shared the funniest story of the day. Every morning, they woke to the sound of waves crashing on the shore. Every evening, they sat side by side on the bench out front, quietly watching the sun slip beneath the horizon. No pressure, no expectations, no judgment, just love, and the freedom they had fought for, together. Evan turned to Layla, brushing a loose strand of hair from her forehead. I never thought, he said, voice rough with emotion, that real freedom could begin with tying myself to someone. Layla opened her eyes, their clarity as calm and endless as the sea that morning. Tying? She smiled gently. If that's what it is, then I tied myself to you a long time ago. They laughed, light and full of something that could only be called joy. Evan leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers, and whispered, "Real freedom is choosing to love without needing anyone's permission." Layla nodded. No words needed, because they both knew. The love they chose, the path they chose, it wasn't easy, but it was theirs. No one could dictate it. No one could take it away. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, leaving a streak of orange-red across the sky. Evan reached for Layla's hand and held it tight, a silent promise. A promise that needed no papers, no witnesses, just two hearts beating in sync. Some people spend their whole lives chasing power, money, and fame. But then there are people like Evan and Layla who choose to give it all up just to hold on to one thing: unconditional love. Their story reminds us, freedom isn't having everything in your hands. Real freedom is daring to love someone without needing anyone's approval. Happiness doesn't come from glitter and gold. It comes from moments like this, sitting beside someone you love in a quiet little cafe, watching the sunset, and knowing deep in your soul that you're exactly where you belong. What about you? Have you ever been willing to give up everything just to be with the one you love? If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe to Love Stories, hit like, and share this with someone special. Drop a comment below. Would you choose love or the safe life someone else planned for you? We'll see you in the next story. Thanks for listening and feeling with Love Stories.